Hey, Rudy, I want to start by just having you react to what we heard the other day from Donald Trump at the G7 meeting, where he blamed Justin Trudeau for kicking Russia out of the G8 when he forgot Stephen Harper was, in fact, the prime minister at the time, right?
Yes, exactly. In 2014, it was Prime Minister Harper during that G7 that basically kicked out. But no, again, Donald Trump repeated that. He repeated that with Prime Minister Carney. Obviously, Prime Minister Carney didn't correct him. But yes, he did also said that. So I think he still have a hard spot when it comes to Justin Trudeau, even if he's not in power anymore, and even if it's not true.
Yeah, I don't think he's ever going to get over that. All right, let's talk about what's going on at the G7. We know that Donald Trump, a big deal yesterday, sitting around that table, meeting with Mark Carney, and then suddenly decides today to leave. So how badly does this hurt the process?
Look, it's very strange because normally, and I'm talking from experience, normally when there's a crisis, you want all leaders to being able to talk to each other. Sometimes you actually convene meetings, you call summits, especially when there's a big international crisis. And it's interesting to see that we have more than 10 head of states in Quebec, in Alberta, in Canada, and President Trump decides to fly back to Washington, where they can, I believe, have some meaningful talks. So it was a bit strange, especially that, for example, today he was supposed to meet with the president of Ukraine, and that meeting didn't happen. He was also supposed to have his first face-to-face with Mexico. It didn't happen, and now he's back in Washington. So he only had one meeting with Prime Minister Carney. There's no real announcement from that meeting, only that negotiations are ongoing, and they're looking at perhaps having a deal in maybe 30 days or so, but nothing concrete. So no deal when it comes to Canada, U.S., and yes, President Trump kind of basically not wanted to talk to Ukraine, not even pushing back on the statement today when it comes to Ukraine. So you can see that we don't know exactly what was his goal to come to Canada, just maybe have a few meetings and that's it. I know he was also not very happy with France because the president of France, just before flying to Canada, actually made a stop to Greenland to basically talk about the sovereignty of Greenland. So maybe that's also a dynamic. But again, President Trump only staying 24 hours instead of the 2 days.
Do you put any credence in this idea that he left because over and above whatever the situation is in the Middle East, he didn't want to have to deal with Vladimir Zelensky again?
I believe so. I believe that's something. I think he wanted to basically talk to all the other leaders and not, for example, address anything when it comes to Ukraine, because today we learned that there was pushback on the statement from the U.S. when it comes to Ukraine. Yes, it is true. There's a big crisis when it comes to Iran and when it comes to Israel. But that is the point of having those big meetings, is to have heads of government, head of state, trying to discuss what's happening, the different scenarios. And Mr. Trump decided not to talk about that. So I do believe that it kind of puzzled that he decided to leave that early and to say that he needs to be back in Washington to deal with it. The president of the United States have all the technology to being able to do his work wherever he is.
Yeah. What about what this means going forward? I brought up when we talked earlier to the CTV reporter, this idea of a 30-day, and I guess they issued a statement, Canada, saying that, we have a window here, 30 days, meeting with the U.S. Do you hold much hope that that actually means very much?
No, because to be honest, we don't know exactly what is happening. What are we negotiating? Even Prime Minister Carney is saying, yes, we're negotiating the economy and security, but what's actually on the table? From my past experience, when we were negotiating, for example, free trade agreements or just commercial agreements, normally you know exactly what is on the table, who is negotiating, what's the schedule, and things like that. For the moment, all we know is that there's meeting. Again, Minister LeBlanc said, yes, we're going to meet, I believe, this week. But we still don't know what are they talking about. Are they talking strictly about aluminum or steel? Are we asking for an exemption, for example, of all tariffs, some tariffs? Don't forget that Prime Minister Carney decided not to push back, for example, when there was the tariff on 50% on aluminum, saying, negotiation are ongoing. So maybe for the moment, Prime Minister Carney is buying some time. But in 30 days or so, I do believe that Canadians are going to ask questions on what's happening when it comes to the Canada-U.S. relationship, because it's been now 2 months that we still are facing tariffs, for example.
Yet in the interim, and I talked about this yesterday, Rudy, popularity poll, whatever, suggesting more Canadians are supporting Carney, the Liberals, than were before, which is interesting.
Yes, no, he's having a good start, especially when you look at the polls. You're correct. But the Canadian economy is hurting. People are losing jobs. I mean, some factories are closing, and even big investments are being postponed. So we are going to feel, if we're not already feeling it, we are going to feel the impact of those tariffs in the months ahead. So you can look at people maybe asking more questions or having more expectation of an agreement with the United States as time passes.
By the way, I will point out, I'm just seeing a story now, I think the Globe and Mail reporting that the Bank of Canada will not cut rates because of what's happening now, Tara, because of the uncertainty, of course. So it looks like there will not be a Bank of Canada rate cut when they announce, and I think that will be tomorrow morning. Let me move on and talk about Pierre Poilievre, whose name is back in the news because there's going to be apparently a leadership review come January. What does this mean?
Yes, this is normal process for every leader who doesn't win government, either minority or majority, needs to go and face the members of the Conservative Party. And it was just announced that this vote is going to happen sooner than later, and it's going to happen in January in Alberta. It is a normal process. It was the same, for example, for Stephen Harper when he didn't won in 2004, for example, in his first election. I do believe that for the moment, you can expect Pierre Poilievre to win that vote, but it's always a question of if he wins that vote, is he going to win with 50%, 60%, 80%? For example, you remember that in the past, Bernard Landry in Quebec resigned because he thought he didn't have enough confidence. Jason Kenney resigned in Alberta, even if he was premier and he had 52%, he said it wasn't enough. So the big question now is what is going to be the level for him of support and if he's going to get it. But I do believe that it's smart for him and for the party to call a confidence vote as early as possible, because otherwise that can drag for months and months, and I don't think it's good for his leadership. He needs to kind of clear the air on that.
But do you think, that's an interesting point that you bring up with respect to the level of support he's going to get. If that number is not a big number, is he the kind of guy you think who says, well, you know what, I don't have the support I want to have and I'm going to leave?
Look, you have to go back to the leadership. Don't forget that when he won the leadership against Jean Charest, it was on the first vote. I think it was close to 70% of members, I do believe. So you can expect that will be, again, the same standard for him. Otherwise, yes, some people may ask some question in terms of is he the man for the next election?
If I can use that as a springboard into the selection, of course, of Pablo Rodriguez as the provincial Liberal leader, talk about a vote that was a lot closer perhaps than most people thought, which people say, look, that just shows the divide in the provincial Liberal Party. And is he the right man? What do you think?
Look, I do believe that it wasn't a strong mandate. He had less than 40% on the first ballot, won on the second ballot only with 52%. I do believe that Charles Milliard did a very good performance. He was even able to beat Cal Blackburn, who was a little bit more well-known than him. So yes, I do believe that when it comes to Pablo Rodriguez, he doesn't have as much as support as you would have expected. Yes, the polls were saying that he was going to win, but it wasn't a very convincing win, 52%. But I do believe that for the moment, if you look at a poll that was just released today, it looks like the Liberals in Quebec are doing well. So I do believe that he has a lot of work, but the problem is the CAQ is not doing well. And that is at the benefit of the PLQ for the moment because they are getting a little bit of traction. And they had a good session when it comes to spring and autumn and spring and winter in National Assembly. And you can see what's happening with Saclic, the third link, happening is scandals in hospital, for example. This is hurting the CAQ, and it's good for the provincial Liberals.
Let me ask you a last question, which is what I asked our audience. I had Raphael Melançon, who wrote a piece today in the Gazette, saying that, you know what, with Pablo Rodriguez now as leader, this opens up the whole sovereignty issue again. Do you believe that's going to happen?
Oh, yes. I do believe that now some traditional voters who perhaps voted for the CAQ, now that they're seeing that Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon has been very vocal and he's been clear saying that he wants a referendum, that this next election in 2026 will be, again, federalism versus sovereignty. So, yes, I do believe that election in 2026 is just going to be like old times. So Pablo Rodriguez needs to be Captain Canada again. So we'll see if he's good in this role.
Would it have mattered if it was Carl Blackburn or Charles Milliard, or is it just because of Pablo Rodriguez?
No, I do believe it's just because Mr. Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon has been clear that he's going to hold a referendum if he wins. So that's why people are now also leaving the CAQ and going to the PLQ, for example.
We will leave it at that. Rudy, thanks so much. Appreciate it.